Welcome back to the channel, hockey fans. The NHL has seen several dynasties over the years where teams dominated the league for extended periods. Here are some of the most notable NHL dynasties. Following the National Hockey League's debut in 1917, the Ottawa Senators emerged as the fledgling league's first dynasty, collecting the Stanley Cup 4 times in the 8 seasons from 1919-20 to 1926-27. In 1920, the Senators defeated the Seattle Metropolitans of the Pacific Coast Hockey Association. They beat the PCHA's Vancouver Millionaires in 1921 and the Edmonton Eskimos of the Western Canada Hockey League in 1923. By the championship of 1927, the Stanley Cup was the sole property of the NHL, and the Senators defeated the Boston Bruins. The Ottawa Senators were sold to St. Louis and became the Eagles in 1935. Although the Senators' name was revived in 1992 with Ottawa's current NHL team. The last surviving member of the original Ottawa Senators was Frank Finnegan, who lobbied diligently to convince the NHL to return to Ottawa, but he passed away in 1991 at the age of 90 before his dream could come to fruition. Toronto becomes the first team to win 3 straight Stanley Cups since 1906 when Ottawa equaled defeat. The Leafs were truly a dominant team throughout the decade of the 40s, winning a total of 5 Stanley Cups, with a lineup that includes the likes of Harry Watson, Syl Apps, and Ted Kennedy. The Dynasty Leafs of the late 1940s were so strong that Dick Beddoes of the Globe and Mail stated that Wayne Gretzky would have been on the 4th line of the team. Even years later, Leafs great Hap Day stood by his belief that it was the strongest team ever. The Detroit Red Wings were a powerhouse in the first half of the 1950s, finishing first during the regular season in each of the 6 seasons between 1949-50 and 1954-55, and winning the Stanley Cup in 1950 against the Rangers, and then in 1952, 54, and 1955 while facing Montreal. The Red Wings were led by the powerful production line of Ted Lindsay, Sid Abel, and Gordie Howe. The trio finished 1-2-3 in league scoring in 1949-50. In 1950-51, Howe won the first of 4 consecutive scoring championships, earning the Art Ross Trophy. The offense was wonderfully paired with a defense that included Red Kelly and Marcel Pronovost on the blue line, and Terry Sawchuk in goal. Behind the bench was Tommy Ivan, while Jack Adams managed the squad. The Red Wings dynasty was loaded with Hall of Famers, including in their 4 Stanley Cup wins with the production line trio of Sid Abel, Gordie Howe, and Ted Lindsay. Abel was replaced on the production line by Alex Delvecchio. Red Kelly and Marcel Pronovost were joined on defense by Blackjack Stewart, as well as Keith Allen and Al Arbor. The Montreal Canadiens accomplished something that no other franchise has been able to match. This dynasty won 5 consecutive Stanley Cup championships, first hoisting the cup in 1956 and repeating each spring to 1960. In 1956, Montreal beat the Red Wings, defeated Boston in 1957 and 1958, and won against Toronto in 1959 and 1960. In fact, they finished first in 4 of those same seasons. The team featured legendary players like Jean Beliveau, Maurice Rocket Richard, Henry Richard, Bernie Boom Boom Geoffrion, Doug Harvey, and Jacques Plante. The potent power play of the Stanley Cup champion Montreal Canadiens leads to a rule change when the NHL announces that players receiving minor penalties will return to the ice as soon as the opponent scores a goal. Previously, teams spent the full 2 minutes shorthanded, which was one of the great benefits of the talent-laden Habs, who often scored more than once during a man advantage. In its 5-year reign as champion, Montreal never trails in a playoff series and is not pushed to Game 7 even once. During the regular season, the Habs averaged more than 40 wins in a campaign. In 1959, Maurice Richard is held off the scoresheet during the playoffs for the first time in his career. Injuries limited his participation to 4 postseason games. Toronto beat the reigning Stanley Cup champion Chicago Blackhawks in 1962, defeated Detroit in 1963 and 1964, and beat the Montreal Canadiens in 1967. The team featured legendary players like George Armstrong, Red Kelly, Dave Keon, Frank Mahovlich, and Bob Pulford. On the blue line, the team featured Tim Horton and Alan Stanley, while Johnny Bower and Terry Sawchuk manned the net. During the 1964 Stanley Cup Final with the Leafs down 3-2 in games to the Detroit Red Wings, Bob Baun fractured his ankle after being hit by a Gordie Howe shot. Baun returned to the game and scored the winning goal in overtime. The Montreal Canadiens won 4 championships in 5 seasons, 1964-65, to 1968-69. The Canadiens triumphed over Chicago in 1965, beat Detroit in 1966, and then defeated the St. Louis Blues in back-to-back seasons of 1968 and 1969 in the new expansion era. Although this team was very good, it has often been overshadowed by the great Montreal dynasties of the 1950s and 1970s. Many argue that this Canadiens dynasty is the greatest ever to take to the ice. No other NHL team dominated both the regular season and the playoffs the way this squad did. The Canadiens almost replicated the jaw-dropping feat of the first Montreal dynasty, winning 4 consecutive Stanley Cup championships, 1976 over Philadelphia, 1977 and 1978 beating Boston, and a win over the New York Rangers in 1979. The Canadiens were virtually unstoppable. Scotty Bowman was a master behind the bench. Guy Lafleur's explosiveness was at its zenith, and he won the Art Ross Trophy as the NHL's top scorer in the first 3 of those 4 seasons. He was third in 1978-79. While Lafleur was scoring 50-plus goals in each of the 4 seasons, line-mate Steve Shutt was close behind, scoring 45, a league-best 60, 49, and 37 respectively. The blue line, tagged the Big Three, was comprised of Guy Lapointe, Larry Robinson, and Serge Savard. Robinson won the Norris Trophy as Best Defenseman in 1976-77 and finished in the top 5 on 2 other occasions, while Lapointe achieved top 5 votes in each of the 4 seasons, and Savard was top 5 in 3 of the 4 seasons. The Selke Trophy for top defensive forward was introduced in 1978, and Bob Gainey won it in both 1978 and 1979. And then there was Ken Dryden, who returned from a year in retirement to win the Vezina Trophy in all 4 seasons, shared with Michel Larocque the last 3 seasons. The Vezina was awarded to the team with the lowest goals against average. The summer after their 4th Cup victory, 3 key players, Ken Dryden, Jacques Lemaire, and Yvon Cournoyer, all announced their retirements, and coach Scotty Bowman left to become GM and coach in Buffalo. Back-to-back dynasties are unprecedented, but such was the case in the early 1980s when the New York Islanders followed the Montreal Canadiens' 4-season run with one of their own. In 1980, the Islanders defeated the Philadelphia Flyers for their first cup. In 1981, it was the Minnesota North Stars. The Islanders beat the Vancouver Canucks, and in their 4th straight championship, a win over the Edmonton Oilers did the trick. The Islanders joined the NHL as an expansion team for the 1972-73 season, so their inaugural Stanley Cup win was only in their 8th season of existence. Prudent draft picks had given the Long Island squad a powerhouse core that carried the team to Stanley Cup glory. In 1980, Brian Trottier won the Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoff MVP. The next year, it was Butch Goring, a veteran acquired at the trade deadline. Mike Bossy won the Smythe in 1982, and Billy Smith earned the trophy in 1983. Together, the Islanders won an unprecedented 19 consecutive playoff series. On April 13, 1982, the Islanders faced playoff elimination. Trailing 3-1 to the Penguins with under 6 minutes to play in the 3rd, New York scored twice in the period and won the game and series in overtime. The New York Islanders were the first and only team from the United States to win 4 consecutive cups. The Islanders took just 8 years to evolve from an expansion team to a Stanley Cup champion. The Oilers were one of 4 teams from the WHA that joined the NHL in 1979-80. In the spring of 1983, they went to the Stanley Cup final against the New York Islanders, but were swept. That infused a gritted-teeth determination to come back, and Edmonton did just that, defeating those same Islanders in 1984 to end one dynasty and start a new one. What followed were victories against the Philadelphia Flyers in 1985, the Flyers again in 1987, and the Boston Bruins in 1988. Wayne Gretzky, who starred with the Oilers through those 4 championships, was traded from Edmonton to the Los Angeles Kings in August 1988. Many believed that would end the Oilers' successes, but they bounced back and won again in 1990 against the Boston Bruins, this time without Gretzky. The 1983-84 squad averaged 5.58 goals per game, an NHL record. The 1983-84 and 1985-86 Oilers included 3 50-goal scorers and 4 100-point players, both league records. There you have it, hockey fans. 9 NHL dynasties. Several other teams fell just short of the requirement to be called a true dynasty. In the comments, please let us know which of these teams you feel is the best and why. Also, are there any teams not on the list that you feel are noteworthy? Hey hockey fans, if you like this content, please slap that subscribe button. You can also follow my blog at https://tedtalkshockey.com, and remember to keep your stick on the ice. Thanks for watching.